Welcome, Swagatham, Vanakkam. In this video, I examine a very significant response received from Anna Soni, a name that members of this YouTube fellowship are quite by now familiar with. She was responding to the video in which I deal with the reported samadhi of Govind Swami in Neyyathinkara. Now, I'll read out Anna Soni's response in the comment box. Stop whenever I think is necessary and offer the kind of explanation that I'm required to provide to the best of my ability. I don't pretend to be particularly qualified in respect of the points that you have raised, but that doesn't prevent me from offering what little I know, hoping that this might be of some use, some value to her and to others similarly disposed. So let's straight away look at her response. Interesting segment. She's commenting on what I included in the video on Govind Swami's Samadhi, which has become a matter of great controversy in Kerala. Originating from my spontaneous thoughts as I was listening to it, I wanted to ask about your understanding on, and this is a request, on palliative care and hospice practices in medical sciences. So her first request is that I comment on, or I offer my views on palliative care and hospice care as they are practiced. I wish to thank Sonia for, Anna Soni for raising this issue in order to provoke me to think. I need to offer a little historical perspective in this regard. I'm sure Anna Soni is familiar with it, but some of my viewers may not be. The origin of both hospice and hospital. First of all, the common factor to both is care, the idea of caring for people in need. Whether it is a hospital or a hospice, and palliative care is by and large considered an aspect of hospital care, though it's also common to hospice care. Now, historically, the origin of both goes back to 12th century AD in Italy. The Roman Catholic priests, out of compassion for people who were terminally ill, particularly poor people who did not have appropriate domestic arrangements for them to die in dignity and peace, they thought of providing a facility to help such people so that they could be brought from their homes, kept in an appropriate place where they could be cared for so that the last phase of their life, maybe the last days of their life, could be spent in serenity and dignity. So at that time, the idea of providing sophisticated medical services was alien to the idea of starting a hospital. By the way, the word hospital in its literal or etymological meaning simply means a place of welcome. This is something that most doctors are unaware of. Hospital and hospitality both belong together to the same etymological root. It means welcome. So a hospital is literally and should always be a place of welcome. Whether that is so or not is a different issue. I remember reading a book many years ago in the 70s by a South American author called Ivan Illich. The title of his book is Medical Nemesis, Structural Iatrogenesis. Now in that book, it's a tiny book, he points out that hospitalization is a matter of trauma for most patients, and he provides some startling data, statistics in that book, and he points out that maybe 5% of deaths that happen in hospitals could be attributed to hospital trauma. I've discussed this detail with several doctors, very high-powered doctors, both in Vellore and in Delhi, and many of them think that this is exaggerated, but almost all of them all of them are inclined to agree that hospitalization is a traumatic experience for patients, and from my own personal experience, I have to say that it is so. So that's as an aside. So a hospital by definition is a place of welcome, and that was how it was envisaged. The hospitals that the Catholic priests in Italy started way back in the 12th century was not at all distinguished for the high quality, high technology medical care that was extended to its inmates. It simply meant a place to which people who did not have in their homes the space and the means that they actually needed in the last phase of their life to die in dignity. Therefore, they were brought to a place of care, a place of welcome by the priests who were inclined to take care of them. So that's a historical origin of the idea of the hospital. We know what has happened subsequently with the progress in medical science, with greater sophistication, greater specialization, super specialization, etc. What originally was meant as a facility for the poor and the destitute have gradually become more and more the preserve of the rich and the affluent, and that's what medical technology has accomplished. Since that's a separate issue, I will not go into the details thereof. Now therefore, the idea of the hospice was, what today is known as a hospice, was the original idea of the hospital. The hospital took off from the idea of the hospice, though initially that hospice was called the hospital. So that's a historical perspective. Now she also raises a question of palliative care. Now palliative care, as all of us know, is extended to people who are chronically ill and are in their terminal stages. That is to say, no recovery is actually contemplated for them, and all that they need, all that's meaningful to be done for them, is maintaining them in a state of comparative comfort, in the sense they are not allowed to be racked by pain and physical misery, which also means that they are given painkillers, whatever they be, so that they are dulled in their sensitivity to the pain that is actually racking their body. And this is done in order that they may be spared the physical trauma of having to live with pain with no end in sight. Here, I may offer an insight from what's called the anesthetic branch of medicine, known as pain management. Now, those who are used to pain management point out that it is easier for human beings to tolerate, to endure acute pain rather than chronic pain. Now, you might think that this is a paradox or this is a contradiction. That's not so. And the reason for this is that acute pain envisages recovery. So there is hope in acute pain. The patient entertains the hope that today, if not tomorrow, if not today, or maybe a few days, if not tomorrow from now, I will recover and I'll be normal again, and I'll be able to resume my life and activities. Whereas in chronic pain, even if the pain experienced by the patient is not acute, it becomes unbearable because there is no hope attached to it. There is no hope in sight that he or she will recover. Therefore, humanly speaking, chronic pain is far more difficult to endure than acute pain. Now, hospice is the arrangement by which people in the state of extreme physical debility, those who are confined to bed, and those who suffer, those who are in the terminal stages of the incurable diseases that they suffer from, are kept for long spells, depending on how long they survive. And it is not really envisaged that they will recover and go back home, and it's difficult for them to be cared for at home because it's so taxing, and therefore and members of the family may not have either the time or the technical know-how or both to undertake that responsibility, and therefore it makes sense that there is a separate place to which such people can be brought and cared for. So that's the idea of the palliative care. Now, so she says, I wanted to ask you about your understanding of palliative care and hospice practices in medical science. So, I've now shared with Anna Sonia and with all of you my very, very limited layman's understanding of palliative care and hospice. Now, it's appropriate for me to point out here that what Mother Teresa was maintaining were hospices. She had hospices all over the world. But people who did not understand the difference between a hospice and a hospital used to criticize her quite unfairly, and especially people coming from the West, saying that Mother Teresa was offering to the inmates of the places that she maintained, home for the destitute and dying, at a level of substandard medical care, not realizing that the difference between a hospital and a hospice is that in the hospice, the main thing is not the quality or high-tech medical care available to the inmates, but the quality of affectionate attention and loving care that they receive. And nobody could say that those who were being cared for Mother Teresa's hospices were neglected or deprived of loving care. And I've had the occasion to be associated with her. I worked as a volunteer for several years in Mother Teresa's home for the destitute and dying in Delhi. A place is called Nirmal Hriday. So I can vouch this from personal experience, that the significant and invaluable aspect of the services that she was running was not that they were really, they could compete with other hospitals in terms of the high-tech, sophisticated medicines or medical care that was available to the inmates, but the people who otherwise would have no place where they can die in dignity. People were picked up from roadsides, etc., brought to the Hriday, and when they were brought there, you can't imagine what state they were. I tell you, the first time I went into Mother Teresa's home for the destitute and dying, I nearly fainted. I had to cover my nose with my handkerchief. It's so trying, it's so difficult. Not many people would dare, leave alone care, to take on the very challenging responsibility of leave alone caring for them and spending even 5 minutes with them. I had to slowly get used to this idea, and over a period of time gather enough strength and endurance to spend 3-4 hours whenever I went there doing whatever work was assigned to me. So running a hospice is not a small thing, but not every hospice is as demanding as the kind of hospice services that Mother Teresa was running. Okay, so I think I've dealt with her first reports. Now let's go further. This will be very helpful to many terminally ill Christian patients in approaching the topics of death and dying. Alright, now as far as those who are terminally ill and those who are cared for in hospices are concerned, what Anna Sonia says here is very relevant. Death is a very real possibility, and therefore they have a need to come to terms with this reality. But to what extent that particular need is addressed in the hospices that are run today, I really do not know. As far as Mother Teresa's home for the destitute and dying were concerned, since they were run by Sisters of Charity and they had a very genuine spiritual life, it's very likely that they incorporated this dimension into the soulful services extended to people in this very desperate state in their life. Though I have to admit that I am not familiar with the details thereof. I attribute much value to the spiritual presence of a person. For example, when I was with Mother Teresa, I tell you, I used to experience a very special kind of spiritual state. Her very presence was powerful enough to induce peace in me, a sense of hope, a sense of higher reality, which included not only the visible world but also something beyond the visible world. her presence was enough to kindle in me a sense of the power of the Spirit that's within us. So it's not merely the words that we utter, but also the quality of the presence that we extend to others. And therefore, I feel that the services that were available to people who were terminally ill, being cared for at Mother Teresa's homes for the destitute and dying, were also ministered to in this respect, though I can't offer you the details thereof. In this context, I must also share with you a particular ethical debate. The debate is this. When doctors diagnose a patient as suffering from a terminally ill state, should the doctor reveal to the patient concerned, especially when the doctor or doctors feel that the patient's death could be imminent, should or shouldn't the doctor or the medical team reveal to the patient concerned the exact state of his or her health status, including the possibility that his or her death could be imminent, so that the patient concerned gets some time, if not adequate time, to square up with one's own personal state, including one's destiny, prepare oneself to enter into this very profound experience about which none of us knows anything, and if possible also incorporate into the total experience available to a patient in that state some kind of help, whatever they be, to be conscious of this higher destiny, this higher reality, and also the help to come to terms with it. I am inclined to believe that it's always better to tell a patient who, in the opinion of the doctors, is likely to die soon, maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, the exact state of that person, so that that truth enables that person, gives him or her sufficient time to come to terms with oneself. But to what extent this is done in all hospitals, I do not know. In fact, I have apprehensions in this regard because modern medical science is tainted with the human hubris, the idea that doctors, armed and equipped with medical technology, which induces a sense of power to doctors and other members of the team, and the delusion that they're up to any task and therefore they can preside over the destiny of the patients under their care. And very few doctors at any rate have the spiritual training or sensitivity or resources to minister to patients under their care in this respect. They may be very good with the medical things, but when it comes to things that go beyond the reach of medicine, they seem to be, in most cases, woefully inadequate. So this will be very helpful to many terminally ill Christian patients. I also think they will be immensely useful to terminally ill patients of all faiths descriptions. Will it be wrong to look forward to eternal life? Now she raises another important issue, and this issue I'm sure she raises with reference to the content of that video, which was the induced samadhi of Govind Swami, in which, that is to say, either the elder son or the two sons of Govind Swami extended some help, in whichever form, we do not know exactly, details are awaited, to facilitate this samadhi. And based on that, Anna raises this question in her own very subtle, very soulful manner. See how beautifully she phrases her question or her point. Will it be wrong to look forward to eternal life and voluntarily enable that journey as one's health declines? And there's so much in this sentence. Let me break the sentence into its parts. Will it be wrong to look forward to eternal life? Now, that is to say, that the last days that we spend on the earth will be under the increasing influence of the life beyond, or concerns about eternal life. So when a person gets more and more convinced about the reality of eternal life, in such a condition, will it be wrong to enable that journey from this world to the next, this world of temporal life into the world of eternal life, and even as the health of that person declines, would it be wrong to gently assist their journey from this world to the next? Now, as I said in the previous video, this is called euthanasia, and in the religious context, now it can be called samadhi. Is it right or wrong? Now, this is a very complicated issue, and everyone knows that this is a very hot and lively debate. I can only share with you my line of thinking, and I don't claim any infallibility or extra or profound wisdom or rare wisdom in this matter. My conviction is as follows. When a person reaches a stage where absolutely no recovery is contemplated, and one's continued existence in the world is one of interminable suffering without any hope of recovery, and therefore what we call meaningless suffering, then there are two aspects to this. One is that caring for such a person is extremely taxing for the dear ones in the family, if the person is retained at home. If the person is sent to an institution which cares for such people, it's a different matter, then you only have to pay for it. But if such a person is kept at home, which is what people who love their dear ones prefer to do in such situations, so that's changing now, then it is extremely taxing for people, and particularly when they too realize that this is meaningless suffering, and the meaninglessness or hopelessness of the predicament intensifies the sense of burden and futility. And this as far as the caregivers are concerned. Now, as regards the individual, that's where my point comes. I think the choice must be left entirely to him or her. Nobody other than the patients concerned has the right to decide how long that patient should suffer, that person should suffer, and how soon his misery should come to an end. If at all there is anyone who has the right and the competence to decide this matter, it is the sufferer or the person himself or herself. But here, unfortunately, religion comes in a very negative manner. Religion is not concerned about the plight of the individual. Religion is concerned about theory and doctrines. I can only speak of it from the Christian point of view. Now, the Christian point of view assumes theoretically that God alone has authority over life, and therefore no individual should arbitrarily claim for himself or herself the right to decide when that person's earthly life should terminate. Just as a person has no right over when the right to choose when to be born, so also the person should not have the right to decide when to die. This is the theory part of it. It's all right for the church to formulate this theory from a distance and impose it on people, but the church is very comfortably excused from the struggle that's involved in implementing the theory. If the people who formulate the theory were also made to face the implications of the theory, I have no doubt at all that the people who are so particularly insistent on this theory would immediately change the theory. So the consequences, the burden falls on somebody else, and therefore it's very comfortable to sound very sanctimonious about it, and that's what's going on. And to make matters worse, and this is where I have the strongest protest. People who choose under certain circumstances to end their life, I'm not condoning suicide en bloc. I'm not saying that, as per the whims and fancies of individuals, suicide should be, that those people should commit suicide or such suicide should be condoned. This is a matter of extreme delicacy. I'm not unaware of the very delicate, complicated and risky aspects of this issue. But thinking of people who are in the last stages of their life, where, particularly in the modern context and the context of nuclear families, very few families, if at all, are capable of absorbing the burden and the tedium, the backbreaking implications of caring for a person in such a state. And the individual who is suffering is totally bereft of or devoid of any hope whatsoever. And his or her eyes, the suffering is meaningless, absurd. In such a state, I feel the right should be 100% given to the individual concerned to decide for how long he or she should suffer. No one else should have anything to say on the matter. Now comes the even more complicated issue of extending help. Now, if a professional, or a non-professional for that matter, extends any help to the individual concerned in expediting, quote unquote, expediting his or her death, which is then deemed tantamount to suicide, then that person becomes culpable within the framework of the existing law. That's one issue. The second issue is that a person who, in that sense, quote unquote, commits suicide, comes under the opprobrium of the church, and at least in olden days, the dead bodies of those who committed suicide were refused burial in the church graveyard. Their dead bodies were dumped outside of it in the place of curse reserved for the accursed. Now, this I believe is extremely cruel. I cannot for the life of me justify this arrangement under any consideration whatsoever. I think it's extremely cruel, it is unchristian, and only people who have no idea about the struggles and difficulties that other people face, or people for whom some theories are more important than the life of individuals, will be dogmatic about it. I would argue very strongly that whatever be the circumstances under which a person committed suicide, once that person's life ends, he or she should be treated as on par with anybody else who dies. After all, after death, what you are left with is a dead body. How do you know, how do I know whether or not that person merited for something in the eye of God? God's ways are mysterious. Now, I quite agree that every human being must cultivate patience, fortitude, endurance. Life is not to be thrown away like a useless item. All that I agree. But unless and until I am in a position to identify with the person who is contemplating suicide, and I'm also willing to mitigate that person's sense of unbearable helplessness or weariness of life or meaninglessness of life, I have no justification, I have no right to legislate for him and decide for him or her whether that person should end his earthly existence now or later. Whether he should die a natural death or he should choose to end his life. Now, suppose I'm old, I'm already old, but suppose I'm already old, I'm bedridden, I'm alone, and there's no one to care for me. What sense does it make for me to continue to live in this state of extreme misery? The society is not able to take care of me. The government makes no provision for me. The church has no time for me. The sense of neighborhood is extremely diluted in Kerala. Everybody lives for oneself and by oneself. In such a state, isn't it absurd to say that the person who is lying alone, completely bedridden, should go on suffering, go on suffering, go on suffering till thy kingdom come, just because there is a theory that committing suicide is an act of despair, and despairing is sin, and therefore people who die in that manner are sinners, and therefore they don't deserve any honorable burial. I think these are all old-fashioned views that were formulated without due concern to the human predicament then, particularly now, and therefore such assumptions have to be re-examined. That's all I'm pleading for. Let there be a rational, sensible, humane re-examination of some of these dogmatic assumptions which were formulated a long time ago when conditions of life were different and the degree of pressure and helplessness acting upon individuals was far less as compared to what it is today. So again, I wish to conclude by placing on record my gratitude to Anna Soni for raising these very pertinent and very relevant issues. Again, I confess that I have no expertise in this field. I've thought about this and articulated my views as a human being, as a lay person. Hopefully, I'll be able to get some doctor to talk about it. but not many people are willing. But if and when I come across somebody who is willing to interact with me on these issues, I'll reopen these questions. In the meanwhile, I wish to thank all of you and conclude this video by saying that it's wonderful to have this kind of forum wherein we can share our concerns as well as our thoughts and insights. Thank you. I wish all of you a very meaningful day.